Greetings, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time from your busy lives to join us today or tonight if you're on the East Coast. I'm Brett Walter, founder and CEO of Climate Action Now, producer of this series of action parties, and creator of the Climate Action Now app. I see a lot of new faces. That's wonderful. Please share your video if you are so inclined. This is a party after all. And tell us where you are from in the chat. For you new folks, new to an action party, let me give you a very, very quick overview. An action party like this is an opportunity to learn about an important environmental topic, like fashion, from people who actually know what the heck they are talking about. And then in the same hour, use the Climate Action Now app to send hundreds or even potentially thousands of personalized, well-researched, well-written messages to political, and in this case, mostly business leaders, demanding action on the topic. And it works. People ask, do I make a difference? You indeed do make a difference. Action parties have helped pass key legislation in large states. You'll find video testimonials from the likes of Bill McKibben and other leading climate activists on our YouTube channel, testifying to the effectiveness of these action parties. I'll put a few links in the chat to those testimonials and some other resources. So to get you started with the action taking, I'd like to hand the spotlight over to Matthew, our Director of Content. Matthew.
Hello, everyone. All right, let me just bring up my action tracker here and share my screen. So if you are new to our action parties, as Brett mentioned, we have an app for you to download. That is where all of the actions for tonight's party are going to be available. And you can access that app by scanning the QR code on the right-hand side of your screen. So if you're unfamiliar with QR codes, they're really easy. All you got to do is take out your phone, hold it right up to your screen here, and open your camera app, whatever you use to take pictures, and point your phone camera right at that box. Instead of taking a picture, just wait for a little yellow bubble to pop up that says Climate Action Now. As soon as that pops up, tap on the little yellow bubble, and it should take you to the App Store, either Apple or Android, depending on your type of phone, to download the Climate Action Now app. And of course, if you already have the Climate Action Now app, it will take you right into the app, into our Fixed Fast Fashion campaign, which is where all of our actions for tonight are going to be located. So give everybody a minute to do that. If you have any technical difficulties, by the way, please just let us know in the chat. We have lots of alternative methods if QR codes aren't treating you well for whatever reason. We have lots of ways to get you on the app, so don't let technical difficulties stop you from taking action tonight, because we do need all hands on deck. We need as many letters sent off to these companies as we possibly can, because the more letters we send, the louder the decibel level will be on this critical issue of fast fashion. That's sort of what we like to say we're all about here at the app, is sort of raising the decibel level on these issues. And I can see several people are already on the app, and the way I know that is the counter on the left-hand side of the screen is going up. So throughout the night, we're going to have this counter on the screen next to our lovely speakers. We'll all get to see this tick up in real time, and hopefully we'll make it to that goal of 3,200 actions by the end of the hour, if not before. So once again, let me know in the chat if you have any issues getting onto the app, creating an account, anything like that, because we want everybody here to be able to take action. So just let me know if you need any help. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Brett. And you're muted, Brett.
And I'm muted, Brett. Okay, thank you for that that introduction. And let me just underscore that it is really so helpful for all of you to be sending these messages to the business and political leaders. Public opinion is the only effective counterweight to the massive power of the fossil fuel industry and industries that are resisting the transition. And they know this, which is why they spend hundreds of millions of dollars on disinformation to try to sway public opinion. So your opinion is your superpower, and the app will let you amplify your superpower. With that, I'd like to finally extend my gratitude and appreciation today to Dr. Marian Krasny of Cornell University, director of the Civic Ecology Lab there, and her two-star students, Nisa Orasevilla and Hadley Flanagan, who are the driving force behind this action party. These are the folks who organized it, lined up our speakers, helped create the actions that you'll be taking tonight. And so to introduce our student heroes, over to you, Marianne.
Thank you, Brett. And yeah, I didn't really do anything on this particular action party because we had two great undergraduate students at Cornell, as Brett mentioned, and Nisa Sevilla, she's a graduating senior, which means that in about a week, she's going to be marching down to get her diploma across the Cornell campus. And she's studying environmental governance and policy at Cornell. And starting last fall, she's been working for the CAN app on sustainable fashion and other issues. And yeah, she's just contributed so much. And Hadley is a little younger. She's a sophomore. She has a couple more years before she gets to go to graduation, but she's studying environmental policy and biology at Cornell. And she joined us just this semester in January and just done a whole bunch of actions that you'll see on the app tonight, especially with Stand Earth and their scorecard. And so I'm going to turn it over to Hadley Flanagan because she's going to be introducing our first actual speaker.
Hi, everyone. Our first speaker tonight is Payal Luthra, who leads World Wildlife Fund's global sustainability efforts in the apparel and textile sector. Her role includes guiding strategy, supporting transformational corporate partnerships, and supporting implementation of projects on ground in freshwater, biodiversity, and climate and energy. Before joining World Wildlife Fund, Ms. Luthra founded an ethical and sustainable fashion label with a mission to celebrate nature and conservation through design. And today she'll be talking a little bit about nature and its connection to fashion.
Great. Thank you so much, Hadley. Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. Let me just share my screen. I have a few slides. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Okay, perfect. Okay. Well, yes, again, really happy to be here. I wanted today to talk a bit about the fashion industry's environmental and social impacts and why we need more regulation. And I think a lot of this you might already know, but I think it's good to maybe get a little bit of a primer on these issues. So, in case you're not aware, I just wanted to start by saying that WWF, we're the world's largest conservation organization, and our mission is to stop the degradation of the planet's natural environment and to build a future in which humans live in harmony with nature. And I want to start by giving a short overview of the current environmental situation that we're all facing. So we're currently experiencing a global crisis. Nature is our life support system. From the air we breathe, the water we drink, people can't survive and thrive without it. But we're losing nature faster than it can restore itself. You may or may not be familiar with the concept of planetary boundaries. Basically, all life on Earth is sustained by vital systems, which are in a delicate balance. But our species, humans, due largely to rapid population growth and explosive consumption, we're destabilizing these Earth processes. And that's endangering the stability of the safe operating space for humanity. And that's sort of that green circle in the middle of this graphic. There are 9 planetary boundaries beyond which we can't push Earth systems without putting our societies at risk. But you can see in this graphic with the orange and the red that we're already existing outside the safe operating space for 6 of the 9 boundaries. That's climate change, biodiversity, land system change, biogeochemical flows, novel entities. Basically, that means toxic substances. And in the last couple of years, it was determined that freshwater had also been transgressed. So this is all very worrisome. We need to bring these levels down to stay within the boundaries that our planet can sustain. And since 1970, we've had a biodiversity decline of 58% of global vertebrate species, 38% of terrestrial species, 36% marine, and freshwater species have declined by a whopping 84%, which is just alarming. This decline it's almost hard to imagine, honestly. And it's worse than, terrestrial and marine biomes. But this is the truth of where we are today. So with that foundation, what is fashion's role in all of this? Fashion has both impacts and dependencies on nature. So, you probably hear this all the time, but what exactly is biodiversity? What does it mean? Essentially biodiversity, it's the variety of life on Earth at all levels, from genes to species to ecosystems. And it's not just about the animal species that we all love. We need biodiversity in order to survive. Ecosystems provide services to our planet, things like water purification, reducing pollution, absorbing carbon, maintaining healthy soils, and much more. And when biodiversity is lost, we lose those ecosystems that are necessary for us to thrive. So biodiversity it's fundamental to the health of societies, economies, and businesses. And it's under severe threat, as I showed in the last slide. So now we come to fashion. How is fashion connected to nature? It's connected through design and inspiration, yes, but it's much, much more than this. Fashion is connected to nature throughout the entire sector's value chain. And when I say value chain, I mean the entire life cycle of fashion, from fibers that are grown and are spun into yarn and woven into fabric, to the dyeing and the finished stitching, to people wearing the clothes, and then to the end of life stage of garments. So fashion is connected to nature at every stage. And fashion's impact on biodiversity loss is massive. The industry, it's highly dependent on biodiversity because everything we wear, all of the raw materials used in fashion to make textiles, they all come from nature. Even a synthetic fiber like polyester comes from petroleum, a non-renewable resource. And the production and processing of these materials, it wouldn't be possible without resources like water, that nature provides. But despite all of these dependencies on biodiversity, the industry's practices are responsible for so many damaging impacts. And that's primarily in the extraction and the production of raw materials and the processing, but it's also in the consumer use phase. So fashion and land use change. Most of the materials used to make garments and textiles come directly from farms, or a lot of it does, from agriculture, from forests. Land use change results from agriculture for producing cotton, wool, hides from cattle, man-made cellulosic fibers such as viscose, and other natural fibers. And preserving our ecosystems it's also critical when it comes to the climate crisis, with deforestation, an example of how we're losing our planet's natural carbon sinks. And our freshwater ecosystems are crucial to the fashion industry. Water is used from the farm level to grow cotton and other natural fibers, all the way along the supply chain to process fibers, to dye and finish products, right to the end when customers, they use water to wash finished items at home. And raw material production, leather tanning, wet processing, all of these often generate water pollution. And then the manufacturing and laundering of garments releases microfibers and other harmful substances into rivers and oceans. For example, conventional cotton production can pollute our waterways and groundwater in the runoff of pesticides, and even petroleum extraction for synthetics. It's highly polluting to water. And then coming to climate change, the emissions from the industry are very high. It's estimated that apparel sector emissions reached, almost 0.9 gigatons of GHG emissions in 2021, almost 2% of annual global GHG emissions. And that sounds maybe a little abstract. So, to help you visualize that, 1 gigaton, it's roughly twice the mass of all people on Earth. So it's huge, if you think about it that way. And recent analysis has found that more than half of the emissions is coming from material processing, Almost a quarter is coming from the raw material cultivation and extraction. So that's, 75% of emissions that are happening kind of back in supply chains that are not sort of under the control of companies directly. And again, deforestation also contributes significantly to increased global warming and climate change. So these are the main impacts that the industry has on nature, and it's exacerbated by the linear system that is the fashion industry today. And so just really quickly, right now we have a take, make, waste model. Take is, essentially the harvesting of the raw materials, make the production of the garments, waste, it's the wearing and subsequent disposal of garments. And like most industries, fashion has relied on this linear economic model to become, this engine of global development and one of the largest consumer industries. It's focused on maximizing efficiencies to achieve high production volumes at lower costs to generate high margins and profits for the industry. And then this, this fast consumption model, it increases the waste challenges of the industry throughout the value chain. We can see with the rise of fast fashion, the number of clothes that were sold has doubled between 2000 to 2015. And it's estimated that more than half of fast fashion produced is disposed of in under 1 year. So here you can see in this graph, as sales have increased, clothing utilization is decreasing. So this throwaway mentality and overproduction, it causes 92 million tons of textile waste to be created each year. And this is only expected to increase. Despite high collection rates of used textiles in some countries, 75% of this is actually landfilled or it's incinerated. It's not being reused, recycled, or upcycled. 70% of textiles that are collected are exported to countries that don't really have the collection infrastructure that they need to handle this. And less than 1% of garments are actually closed loop recycled right now. So recycling at a significant scale, we are so far from that being a reality. So then just the last thing I wanted to mention is that this also has major impacts on the social side of things. This linear fashion cycle, it has a severe human cost. The rapid, basically to meet this surge in demand, while keeping prices low, many companies have looked for ways to cut costs. One common approach has been to move production to countries where labor is cheaper and regulations are less strict. And then labor exploitation has become rampant, to produce such large quantities of clothing at such a minimal cost. So it's really, it's important to understand that colonialism is deeply entrenched in the structures and systems that prop up the industry as it appears today. And here are just some quick sobering statistics. The fast fashion industry employs, approximately 75 million factory workers, but of those, less than 2% actually receive a living wage. And 71% of all child labor is found in agriculture, including cotton production. Sadly, cotton is one of the most common commodities produced with child labor and forced labor. And, the other impacts beyond forced and child labor are, exposure to harmful and toxic chemicals, unsafe working conditions, and gender discrimination and physical violence. The fashion supply chain, it's largely built on the backs of women of color in the global South, and that's by design. So we really need to recognize the structural inequalities that are inherent in the fashion system, and we need to basically shift that balance of power. So, looking forward, basically, the time to act is now. So with, with all that I've said, you can see it's very clear how fashion's linear model causes exploitation of both nature and people. And this has to change. And, fashion, it stands as one of the most powerful and influential forces we know. It fosters, everything from self-expression, it shapes identity, belonging, everything to, defining values, all of this. But, if you can think about that and then just imagine how different things could be if these immense resources that this industry has, if it was shifted towards equity and sustainability, it would have such an incredible impact. And that can happen, but, we need everyone to take action. So government regulation is key. And, that's why you're all here today. nothing is going to happen. We're not going to make the progress we need without it. Private sector engagement is also crucial in this fight against climate change and biodiversity loss. And at WWF, I can say we work in partnership with companies to do many things like reducing their environmental impacts, transforming their operations, supply chains, supporting and improving the livelihoods of farmers, many things. We're essentially driving companies towards resource stewardship. And then, consumers, they have a huge role to play in demanding more transparency, traceability, and sustainability from brands, and in influencing government. So consumers have power, and collectively, we really can achieve a lot. So I'll just stop on that note. Thanks again for all of you for joining today. And I'll give it back to Hadley. And I'll stop sharing.
Thank you, Payal, and thank you all for attending tonight. Before I introduce the next panelist, I wanted to draw all of your attention to the importance of advocating on social media as well. So fashion corporations stand to gain a lot from their presence on social media, and it's a great way to engage with them and ask for greater accountability. To this effect, we have the social media team here at Climate Action Now has put together a document with graphics and comments to download that you can insert directly into Instagram and post. So I will post that into the chat right now after introducing the next speaker. And if you have any questions about it, please feel free to put them into the chat and I will answer them. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our next panelist. Rachel Kitchen is Senior Corporate Climate Campaigner for Fossil-Free Fashion at North American environmental NGO Stand Earth. Rachel has been leading on Stand Earth's corporate advocacy work, and Rachel will be sharing with us key insights into corporate accountability and the Stand Earth scorecard. Thank you, Rachel.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, I have a couple of slides that I can share as well, which I will do very quickly. My name is Rachel, and as mentioned, I work at Stand.Earth, where I lead our campaign on fossil-free fashion, which is where we are aiming to engage corporations, push businesses to move faster and move further to cut fossil fuels out of their global supply chains. And the reason that we do this work is, as you've already heard, the fashion industry has a massive impact on the climate. Fashion's emissions globally are in an absolute state of kind of runaway danger. It's really huge, really significant. And that is because the industry, throughout all of its global supply chains, in some ways you've heard already, have massive and very deep ties to the fossil fuel industry. It's only really quite recently, due to a lack of regulation up until this point, that fashion companies have even started setting targets to reduce their emissions, or even started disclosing what their emissions are from their supply chain. And some still don't, which is quite scary when you understand that more than 90% of a fashion company's emissions are in its supply chain. It was 2017 that Stand launched its first fashion campaign. We campaigned and asked Levi's, the denim brand, to set a target to cut its supply chain emissions. And in 2017, they set their first target to reduce emissions in the supply chain, which was kind of the start of brands moving towards Scope 3 targets and including them in their science-based targets. And yeah, the problem is when you look at clash in supply chains, it's fossil fuels all the way down. So you can see that fossil fuels are part of raw materials production. So we've had like the vast majority of clothes that are made and textiles are made of polyester or other synthetics, which is effectively wearing oil. There's thermal heat process in manufacturing. What that basically means is when they're washing clothes, drying them, applying dyes, all these processes that happen to make the fabrics look how they want them to look, that is mostly relying on burning coal on site in factories. And if it's not coal, then sometimes it's gas, or sometimes it's burning biomass, which is, wood chips or other types of fuel. And then there's the electricity that's used to make it. Vast amounts of electricity and other energy, most of which comes from fossil fuels. Most electricity in the world comes from fossil fuels, but in the countries where fashion supply chains happen to be based, it's absolute vast majority, and very little is coming from renewable energy sources. And then, of course, you have the fact that these companies, which are mostly selling to people in the West, people in Europe and North America, but are shipping their product all the way from mostly Southeast Asia and Asia countries, then have to rely on very heavily emitting transportation systems, like really big freight ships that use heavy fuels and emit a lot of toxic pollution, or more recently, putting them on planes and flying them across the world, which isn't great either. So this is a huge problem. And as you already heard, around 53% of the emissions in fashion supply chains are in what's called tier 2. So there's kind of heat processes. In Bangladesh alone, there are more than 10,000 of these thermal boilers. Bangladesh, 85% of its exports are from the fashion industry. So it's a huge part of what makes Bangladesh kind of function and where the Bangladeshi economy is based. And unfortunately, there's only a few companies out there that have made any kind of commitment towards phasing out coal. We know from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, from so many reports and all of this important, really critical climate research, that coal needs to be phased out by 2030 or 2035 at the latest in order to keep climate change within a reasonable kind of 1.5 degree reasonable. So this is a really huge problem. If these companies are actually increasing orders, buying more and more and more, then what happens? More coal. And in the countries like Bangladesh here, you can see like China, India, Vietnam, these big manufacturing countries, they're actually increasing the need for coal within these countries. They're increasing the need for coal and other fossil fuels to make electricity, to burn on site for thermal processes. And rather than coal being phased out, coal is actually increasing. And this is a huge problem, and we've already talked about the scale of the fashion industry. Their impact is very, very real. So solutions, we can't just talk about the problems here. There are solutions. And I think it's at Stand what we do, which is really important. We try and kind of focus our niches to focus on the idea that businesses like these fashion companies, they're big, they're powerful, they're influential, and they can be actors. They can be part of this solution. And that's kind of why we're all here today, is that they're not going to just go out there and do it on their own. They need to be pushed. They need to be shown that it's an essential part of being a business in this modern world, is that you need to be a good corporate citizen as well. And the most impactful thing that they can do to cut emissions is transition to renewable energy. And the fashion industry can be part of pushing for a real renewable energy transition across, you know, at a national level. It can be really part of a catalyzing a change, but it's only going to do that if we tell them that they have to. And I think this other point is really important to make as well, which is that when we talk about the fashion industry and cutting emissions, we're actually talking about not, you know, we're not talking about Levi's, we're not talking about H&M, we're not talking about Gap or whoever, Zara. We're talking about the manufacturers, the people who are making the clothes, and the people who own the businesses, the factories, making the change and doing the work. And so it's very easy for a fashion brand to tell, you know, say, yeah, we're going to cut emissions, we're going to, and then go to their suppliers and say, you guys have to cut emissions. What's harder is to make sure that they actually are playing a part in that, because instead of just pocketing all the profits and walking away, they need to be paying their fair share, and they need to be acting collectively and being part of the solution. And ultimately, stop making so much stuff. So this is the kind of foundation of the fossil-free fashion scorecard, and I will speed up because I know I've been talking a lot. Basically, we created this scorecard a couple of years ago as to measure, I think it's 43 brands now, against 5 criteria, areas of criteria, which are related to cutting out fossil fuels from their supply chains. We're looking at the kind of commitments that they're making, how transparent they are. We're looking at how much they are increasing renewable energy in their supply chains, how much they're advocating at a national and international level for more access to renewables, because, you know, sometimes there just isn't any available, but they have power, they have influence, they can go out there and make a change too. What they're doing to cut fossil fuels out of their materials, you know, what about the polyester? What are they doing to support regenerative farming and better alternatives? And greener shipping. What are they doing to stop all of the pollution that is caused by marine shipping, by aviation, of shipping their products around the world? And there's a lot of text here, but basically what we found last year in the 2023 scorecard was that there's not a ton of urgency out there among these brands. There's some movement happening. There is more talk about more target setting. There's more talk. There's a little more transparency, but emissions continue to rise. And really just among the vast majority of these companies, not enough is happening. They're not feeling enough pressure. They're not aware. They're not acting on the urgency of the moment. Very little progress in phasing out synthetic fibers. You know, we're just wearing more and more oil, unfortunately, and everyone's relying on the idea of recycled fabrics, which are questionable. And we can see there's this small kind of core of companies who are talking about phasing out coal, but instead they want to start burning trees instead. So we have to start kind of really watching out for false solutions that are coming down the line. I'm going to skip over these, but I wanted to draw your attention to the fact that we're not just talking about fast fashion here. I know it's very tempting to kind of blame fast fashion for everything, but actually, at the end of the day, the planet doesn't really differentiate between H&M making a garment or Puma making a garment or Gucci making a garment. And the luxury brands are making just as much and using the same kind of fabrics and pumping out, burning the same coal as all of the other companies here. So all of these companies really deserve the same scrutiny, they deserve the same attention, they deserve the same pressure. And just kind of quickly, a few emerging issues that we are following here. One is around false solutions. You know, we're seeing different as companies try to kind of move away from burning coal, they're looking for other things that they can burn instead of switching to renewables. We're seeing more greenwashing popping up. You know, Stand Earth, we recently asked Canada's greenwashing regulator to investigate Lululemon because they have some of the most egregious claims that I've seen out there, claiming that their products make the planet healthier, which seems pretty unlikely given that they are made of plastic, they're made of oil, they're made in factories burning coal, they're shipped around the world and some mostly flown around the world. All the same problems as the other companies. And we're seeing increasingly the rise of ultra fast fashion as well. So it's next week, Stand is actually releasing an update to this report where we've looked at just 11 brands and kind of really focused in on what they're doing to transition to renewables and what they're doing to how they're progressing towards 2030. And we found, just as a sneak peek, we found that some brands were actually starting to cut their emissions. Meanwhile, Shein came in from the back of the pack and increased its emissions by more than 50% in 1 year, almost wiping out all of those gains. So there are some really kind of concerning emerging trends that we absolutely need to take action to deal with here. And I think that I will pause there, but thank you so much for having me. And yeah, and thanks everyone for being here.
And I'll just jump in, sorry, real quick, Nisa. I mentioned that we only have 72 more actions yet before we before we meet our goal. So notice the ticker has slowed down a little bit. So if you've been taking the time to listen to our wonderful speakers, which is very understandable, please do get back on the app when you get a moment, and let's get those last 70 actions on the board before the end of the hour.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Rachel. Yeah, so just a reminder, it's really important to take action also on social media. So if you can take a look at those actions that we have on the document, that'd be great. And I'll pass it off to Hadley to introduce the next speaker.
Hello again, everyone. Our last speaker is Naiko Kolas. She's an assistant professor of fashion design and the associate director of the MPS Fashion Management Program at Parsons School of Design in New York City. Naiko is a sustainable designer and the founder of Jacques Louis, a sustainable brand that designs timeless pieces using natural fibers, dead stock fabrics, and recycled materials while also encouraging consumers to invest in conscious practices. Her goal is to change how disadvantaged communities perceive environmental development and inspire them to adopt lifestyles of health and sustainability. She'll be sharing a little today about her work and sustainable fashion from more of a consumer perspective.
Thank you so much, Hadley. Good evening, if it's evening where you are. Everyone, it is in New York City. That's where I'm based. So I'm also the director of sustainability for a brand called Ovation in Store. And I just wanted to add to my intro. It's very similar to my background is kind of similar to yours, Hadley. I did study environmental science when I was in college. And that's biological sciences, a minor in chemistry, and then went on to Pratt with a master's in design management. I think I've always really just been interested in sustainability and environmental sustainability, but also on the community development side. And I just wanted to start out by just mentioning when we think of sustainability, we often think that environmental sustainability is not really connected to social justice or the social aspect of sustainability, but it is. And that's what we teach the students at Parsons. And I'll go into that later in the slide. And I wanted to mention the fact that Shein has a new collection coming out with Queen of Raw. If anyone here is familiar, or if there's any fashion designers on the call, there's a brand called Queen of Raw where you can that they house dead stock fabrics. It's very similar to Fab Scrap. If you've heard of Fab Scrap, those are two spaces that you can tap into for dead stock, and it's truly dead stock. And they do have scrap packs as well. So that's the first action that you can take as a consumer, but I'll start sharing my screen. Okay. So intro to who I am, I just did that. What can you do? So I'm just going to start out by what can you do as a consumer mostly, and then as an organization, you know, whether you're in academia or if you work for a larger corporation, even if you're not on the sustainability team, many of you probably are or may not be, what you can do to kind of push your organization to tap into environmental sustainability, regardless of the municipality that you're in. So first, who am I? Just explain that starting with your municipality. So if you do live in New York City, I wanted just to share some local laws. I have an NYC there twice, but I wanted to share some local laws that you can get a little bit familiar with if you are here in the city. There's a few local laws for businesses. One being if you are a certain size corporation, organization, if you manufacture, there's a local law that goes into effect in 2025. And that is going to be based off of your emissions. So depending on, there's a threshold that they'll provide you, and it's calculated and it's dependent on your square footage. You will be fined if you go over that. So that's more part of ESG. There's other local laws where if you are familiar, or if you are in New York City, you've probably passed a building that has like a F rating, a B rating, a D rating. Those are all a part of a benchmarking program that New York City has, where each year a corporation has to basically submit their data. So that's their scope 1, 2, and 3 data. And that is their energy, water, and gas usage here in New York City. So start by doing that, you know, looking to see what rating an organization has on their building, so that you can kind of understand if they are actually tapping into the space of environmental sustainability. And so because I worked for the Department of Sanitation, or the Bureau of Recycling and Sustainability, for about 5.5 years, of course, I have a lot of resources here from the DSNY. The first one, and I do this here, is compost bins. So in New York City, they work with New York City Department of Sanitation. They have a partnership with Grow NYC. And Grow NYC, if you are here, you will see that they have drop-off locations where you can actually drop off your compost, and or you may have that pickup. You may your building may have access to have the Department of Sanitation come in and pick up your food scraps and your food waste. You'll probably see a brown bin if you're in New York City with the orange hatch, and that's to keep all of the rodents out. But they're, you know, they do their pickups once a week. You can also, I'm not sure if the city is still doing it or if they're on a pause, but there is a possibility that you can request a bin for your building to pick up your compost. And so my building that I'm, you know, my apartment building, we have access to compost, and it is accessible in all 5 boroughs. So even if the Department of Sanitation will not pick up from your building or your home, you do have access. If you go on grownyc.org/compost, you'll see the different sites. All you have to do is pop in your zip code and you'll get the information there. Now, if you're living in New York City, you do have access to e-cycle bins. They're e-waste bins. And there's usually like a big cage that the Department of Sanitation will place into your building, and you'll go to, if you have your older TVs or anything that's considered electronic waste, you could place it and hand it off to your building super, and then they will do pickups whenever it's filled. And we also have access to refashion. Refashion our bins. If you live in New York City, you may see the refashion bins in buildings, and that is where the refashion bins are collecting clothing. So if you have any clothing in your home that you want to get rid of, but you want it to go into maybe a Housing Works or a Goodwill or Salvation Army, you can drop it off in your refashion bin. Lastly, if you are, I have about 5 slides of what you can do if you live in New York City. If you have any e-waste or any paints or batteries or LED lights, certain things that are not considered e-waste, but they are considered hazardous, the New York City Department of Sanitation hosts about 6 safe disposal events per year in the spring and summer, and possibly even more than 6, maybe even 8. And you basically fill up your car. You and your friends can do this. Fill up your car, head to a safe disposal event, and drop off all of your goods. And that is completely free if you live in New York City. So to reduce waste, myself, I'm a bag lady, so I always walk around with reusable bags. If you live in New York City, you probably do this all regardless, you know, so you can easily pack them in your purse or in your car, your book bag. Some of them do have clips, so it makes it even easier. It's a small action that can make a big difference in saving plastic bags, right? One that I always share is attending a community board meeting. So attending a community board meeting, most residents in New York City possibly have not done this, but if you have access to attend a community board meeting, you will be able to speak to the Department of Sanitation, the FDNY, the NYPD, and there's different mayor's office agencies that are present. And if you have any issues with, you know, maybe it's an issue you have with a resident that's not, you know, picking up their trash, or they're, you know, illegally dumping, all of these things, you can have conversations with the DSNY there. And it just allows you to get a little bit more familiar with the agencies and the resources that you have access to that are free. There's also beach cleanups. If you have a free Saturday, there's a few beach cleanups that are in your neighborhood or your community. You don't necessarily have to be based in New York State or New York City, but this is one that that was available through Rockaway Beach Cleanup. They've been doing a few of them here in New York City. Another, if you're a resident, there are so many different programs, or even if you're a commercial establishment in New York City, there's so many opportunities to tap into solar, which is renewable energy. There's wind, there's of course geothermal, hydropower, ocean energy, etc. But I would say the easiest one, or there are so many incentives for tapping into solar here. If you're an organization, there are grants through NYSERDA and through the city where you can possibly receive at least 30% back on your spend for solar. And, you know, solar could range from $200,000 to like $800,000 if you're a commercial establishment. As a consumer, I always share this with students. I share this with friends. There is a greenhouse gas equivalencies calculator on the EPA's website. So you can do things like go on your gas bill or your electric bill and see how many kilowatt hours that you've used or therms of energy that you've used, and calculate your footprint through that. So you can do that using your Con Ed bill or your energy bill, and then your water bill and your gas bill. Those three things for sure. As a consumer, just understanding the footprint of your household outside of all of the products that you're using on a day-to-day basis, you can get a better understanding of your footprint. Understanding blockchain technology, I think that's extremely important for brands, but also for consumers, because there are a lot of brands that are actually using blockchain technology that we're not familiar with. One being a recently new brand that, well, not a new brand, but they're really pushing for this environmental sustainability, is Chloe. And Chloe, you know, is a Stella McCartney competitor, and they're tapping into blockchain and renewable resources and fibers. And so, you know, there's a little tag on your clothing, and it'll have like a little barcode, and you can basically scan that to get a more transparent view of the supply chain. So, you know, what farm did it come from start to finish, if you're thinking of your supply chain. There's websites like Good On You. Good On You they have a rating system for brands, and you can go on there. And also I do often share, outside of Good On You, just do a lot of your own research, because sometimes on Good On You, it may say that the brand is, you know, B rated or C rated. And in my head, I'm like, they should probably receive an F. There's BOF. And so BOF is definitely business of fashion. Many of you are probably familiar with BOF. There's the UNGC, the United Nations Global Compact. They have these 10 principles, and these 10 principles tap into environmental sustainability, gender equality, code of conduct, all of these different spaces. And so they do offer webinars for consumers. So you can go on the UNGC and you can watch webinars. You can get certified in gender equality. They have accelerators there. So you may not have to be a member of the UN Global Compact, although Ovation in Store is a member of UN Global Compact, So we have access to that. And lastly, there's Sustainably Chic. I do follow that Instagram page. I have been following it for years. But they have a blog section, and they just often go into different spaces of like, not just sustainable fashion, but sustainability in general. And I would say just to tap into following social media activists. So activists on social media that are invested in environmental sustainability, but just outside of environmental sustainability, I think it's also important just to understand the relationship between that community development. So when we say people, planet, profit, those things are relative and they all, one affects the other, right? So if you see someone on social media that's probably in community development, or they're environmental activists, they're possibly also very big in the space of social justice, and they're very relative, right? For corporations now, there are abatement plans that you can adopt. There's a few, templates everywhere that you can find for abatement plans on how to decrease your scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Shifting the brand strategy to implement more sustainable practices is extremely important. For example, I will say with Ovation In-Store, one of our clients is L'Oreal, and they're doing really well in the space of sustainable practices. They have golden rules for their suppliers. And so these are the brands that are actually, they have a grading system for their suppliers. And I would say that just understanding what these brands are doing on the, the back end that consumers are not seeing, but because they're one of my clients, I really know that they are really great in that space. For organizations, they can actually create a science-based target. And this is verified through the Science-Based Target Initiative. Again, solar energy, creating a sustainability code of conduct for suppliers. And as a consumer, you can look to see if there's an organization that is B Corp certified, if they have their CDP rating, so it's a Carbon Disclosure Project, and then EcoVadis rating, and then UN Global Compact. In order for them to remain a member, they do have to they have to send in yearly updates on their efforts and how they've increased. And EcoVadis the same with the rating. In academia, I know I probably have like maybe one more minute or two. So in academia, sustainable fashion design education is essential. And at Parsons, we basically implemented environmental sustainability, or just sustainability in general, down to DE&I into our curriculum, which I think is extremely important. So we teach the students how to incorporate environmental sustainability into their, the work, their designs. We teach students how to examine systems and to map out relationships in various systems. And I would say a very great book that I would recommend is Thinking in Systems by Donella Meadows. And then exploring the relationship between design and the natural environment. And I know the first speaker touched on this. And a book that I would recommend is Biomimicry for this as a consumer. ESG, just understanding what environmental social governance is, because there's so many organizations that may be late to the party and may not want to actually shift their business strategy to be a little bit more sustainable, but they will have to, right? So when we're thinking about that 1.5 degrees Celsius, the Paris Climate Accord, all of these things, they're part of ESG. And for students, if you are a student, there are a lot of climate action clubs on campus and off of campus. So these are just a few different things that I was going to add, but I know that I'm out of time. So I'll leave it there, and then I'll plop some the books in the chat for you all. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Nika and Rachel and Pyle. And Matthew, did you want to make a few comments on the tracker?
Indeed, we made it.
We have a couple of questions I'll ask from the participants.
Yes, but we made it past our goal of 3,200 to 3,300. We got an extra 108 on the board so far, so that's great to see. Congratulations, everyone. My last thing I'll say is keep using the app. We have thousands and thousands of actions, new ones coming in every day. A lot of people like to do 5 minutes on the app while they're making their morning coffee or what have you. But if you care about the planet, you want to something you can do every day that actually makes a difference, please do come back to the app because we have more actions than you could ever possibly take. So you won't be bored as a climate activist if you make the app part of your daily routine. Back to you, Marianne.
Thanks, Matthew. And we only have time for 1 or 2 questions. So I'm going to ask a question here from, and I'm going to pronounce the name wrong, but Lola Oni. And they write, there are fabrics made from plastics in the bid to reduce plastic pollution. I would like to know if this is really sustainable. So any of the speakers, if you want to just offer, real quick comments, and then maybe we'll get in another question.
I would just unmute myself and say, I don't think that recycled or fabrics made from recycled plastics are actually sustainable because of microfibers or microplastics going into our water system. So they do come off that, that the emissions is a little bit lower or it's less. But when you think of the material that it's made from, I guess it's just a nice first step to getting into this space. But yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then from Deb Lloyd, she says, clothes that are given to charity resale shops such as Goodwill, are they usually sold? What happens to clothes that do not sell?
I guess I can jump in on that. Unfortunately, a lot of the clothes that are given to these shops is not sold. And I think I may have mentioned it even in my slides before. It's about 70% that's not sold. And most of these clothes are being exported to the global south, to different countries. So it's a very big issue. It's not that these charities are not trying to do, a great job and to take these things in, but a lot of what's given to these shops is not really sellable. That's another thing. One thing I tell people is if you have clothes that you no longer need, you no longer can use, I mean, to really think about the different ways of, how it could have another life. And, yes, you can donate to some of these shops. And if you are going to do that, I would say don't donate anything that you yourself wouldn't buy in that store. If it's stained, if it has issues with it, please don't, because it won't get sold. And it's just getting kind of passed on and is, burdening others. One thing I do, just to kind of quickly say, is, in my city where I live, there's a great organization that helps people that have been, recently homeless. And so you can give clothes, they tell you exactly what they need. They do a great job of sorting, and that these clothes are actually going to people that need them. They're not going to be, passed off. They're not going to be incinerated or landfilled at some point. So yeah, I think it's just being mindful about it can go a long way.
Thank you. So we got 1 minute left. So I want to turn it over to Brett to take us on out.
Okay. Yeah, well, thank you, everybody. As you can tell from the way I'm dressed, I probably learned more about fashion tonight than 100 times more than I knew before this. I really appreciate the hard work that our panelists and their organizations are doing on this really difficult problem. This is a tough one. They talk about hard to decarbonize industries. Oh my God, the fossil fuel industry. And you guys have the courage to really tackle it and work hard on it. And so we're honored to be able to help you spread the message and your information. For those of you everybody who's on the call, probably sometime tomorrow, I will be sending you and all the other people who registered links to the recording, and I'll include the QR code. So if you did not have time tonight, or you struggled, to get going, or you didn't want to do that, you just wanted to be focused on our terrific panelists and what they were saying, not to worry, you'll get the email, you get the QR code, you can see the recording, and you can then actually sit down and take those actions tomorrow. And I guarantee you that number there, 3,316 messages that have been sent on fast fashion, that will be over 5,000 a week from today, because other people who are using the app will find those and they'll be taking them too. So you are the can-doers. You are the folks who really can help solve this problem, and you do it by expressing your opinion. If you don't speak up, your opinion isn't worth much, but if you do, you can move mountains. Thank you again. I put in the link in the chat, a link to our next action party, which is ban CO2 fracking, that's for New Yorkers. So for those of you from New York, that's going to be a really, really great action party. So again, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.